to give the performance management training. So again, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it, and I love to have the chance to talk to and meet new supervisors, supervisors who've been here for a long time, and people who just want to come to the Human Resources University. We always appreciate the outreach that happens here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. There is a section for questions at the end, but I'll be happy to take a few as they go through. But let's get this party started. Provided the clicker works. There we go. Okay, so you have the handouts in front of you. You should all have a copy of the slides so you can follow along with me if you'd like. Take notes. Here are the training objectives for this class. The training objectives, by the end of it, I would like for you to know the definition of performance management, the supervisor's roles and responsibilities, the components of performance management, the benefits of performance management, progressive discipline and what you do when you take action. And also, I want you to be able to identify your resources. I want for you to be able to know who to come and talk to and where to go if you have any questions about anything. So, welcome to supervision. Some of you have been here for a while, some of you are new, but if you've been here for a while, you might recognize some of this. Hooray, supervisor. So, as you can see, you're probably going to be a coach. You're going to be there with your analysts or with your technicians. You're going to be able to sit there and teach them about what they need to know. Sometimes you're going to be a counselor. Your staff is going to report to you, and they're going to come to you. They're going to talk to you about things that are going on in their lives. They're going to talk to you. They're going to ask for time off, and they're going to tell you about things. And you're going to have to be prepared to sit there and talk to them with an open mind. You're going to ensure your staff's health and safety. You're going to be a little bit of a nurse here, too. You have to be a team builder. You have to be able to bring your staff together, boost their morale, and ensure that you guys are all there to get the critical work of your unit, your branch, your division, the department done. You're going to be an explorer and a leader. You are at the head of your unit or your branch or your division, and you have to be the one who goes out in front of them and explores those uncharted territories and then brings things back for them to learn, to be able to teach them. At times, you're going to be an enforcer, and we're going to get to that a little bit more later. You're also going to be a warrior. You're going to be a warrior for yourself. You're going to be a warrior for your staff because it's your responsibility to protect and boost them as well. And you're going to be a warrior for the department. We're all here because we're public servants. We're here to do something. We're here to forward the mission of the department, and that is something that you should be prepared to be invested in. Finally, when all else fails, you're kind of a magician. Somebody comes to you and they say, please do something about this, and you have to find a way to make it happen. That's part of the joy. Ooh, okay, there we go. So, performance management, what is it? Here's a definition first. Performance management is the process of creating a work environment in which employees are enabled to perform to the best of their abilities in order to meet mission-critical program objectives. The point is that we're all here for a reason, and what you need to do is ensure that your staff is working to the best of their ability, whether that's through positive reinforcement or through taking progressive discipline steps. Am I working here? There we go. Okay, so this is something that I just sort of wanted to briefly expose everybody to. There's a couple of slides in here that I included because they're part of the California Health and Human Services Agency supervision and leadership model. And it's something that I just wanted to throw in there because we're all under agency. These are the expectations that they have for managers and supervisors. So we've got our little circle of management functions. And then here's the leadership competency model. I'll leave it to you to look through it on the slide at your leisure. But it is something that, again, agency puts out there, and agency decides this is how they'd like their leaders and managers to address people. So let's talk a little bit about performance management and about some of the changes that have happened. If you're a supervisor who has been here for a little while, then you're probably, you probably maybe had some dealings with performance management in the past. Maybe you're not quite sure of the process. But what I'm here to do is to create a little bit of transparency and also to tell you about what changes we've put in place since about the middle of last year that will hopefully make things easier for us and for you guys to understand how this works. So first of all, we've piloted some changes. We have a revised PS366 form that should be easier to use. It's got very clear directions on it, and it can be found on the intranet. It is on there now. We also have a sample PS366 package for guidance. That should be making its way up onto the intranet fairly soon. We need to do some sort of necessary redaction, but the idea is to give you guys an idea of what it is. Finally, we have a pilot 60-day timeline for PS366 requests in coordination with all stakeholders. What that means, what that means is that if you come to us and you say, I need to take a notice of adverse action, or I need to reject someone during probation, we have a goal of getting this done within 60 business days. That is the beginning to end process, and that is our goal. That depends on some different factors. It depends on how quickly we can get the information from you guys, and it depends on how quickly we can pull everything together. But 60 days is currently our goal, and we put this out there so that you know, here's what we're working with. Here's our tentative timeline, and that is something that is new. That's something that was a challenge that was handed down from the directorate that said, let's clean these up. Let's get this done fast. So right now, that is where we are at. So there's the draft of the 60-day timeline. You can also find this in an HRML that came out a few months back. The HRML addressed performance management. It introduced the team. It introduced the unit. And it also brought this to light as well. This is the 60-day timeline. And again, in the interest of transparency, here's where we are. This is the process that it goes through. This is what my analysts do. This is what legal does. And this is what I do, what I and my managers do when we review things and we ensure that everything is accurate, factual, and will work for us and for the department. So let's start a little bit with performance management and talk about building your team and how intuitive it can really be. This is where a lot of people sometimes don't know where to start, but truly, it's intuitive. Let's talk about buying a car. So, you need a new car. What are the first things you're going to do? First of all, you're going to make a list of all the features that you want. Second, you're going to consider available inventory. What's out there? What can I buy? Hopefully, you're going to take the car for a test drive. You're going to make sure that that car feels good to you, that you can drive it, and that it drives well. You're going to hopefully speak with experienced drivers. Talk to someone who owns a Tesla or a Ford and say, how do you like yours? Make your selection. What are you going to choose? What type of car are you going to have? You're going to want to understand your warranty. The warranty is important because what's covered? What happens if I bump into something? What happens if a piece of my car falls off 60 days in? You're going to review your handbook. What are all the different features? What do I do with this car? What happens when this light comes on? You're going to be responsible for maintenance. You're going to want to take it in to have the oil changed. You're going to want to get your filters checked. You're going to want to make sure that it's running as best as it can. You're also going to have or do responsible systems monitoring. When this light goes on, you're going to get it checked out. When the check engine light comes on, really get it checked out. And finally, you should have a good return on your investment. You've got a car that functions, you've got a car that runs well, you took good care of it, and now you can drive it for many years. There are some parallels to building a team here. First of all, when you decide that you need to hire someone, the first thing you're going to want to do is develop a screening matrix. What are you looking for in your candidate? What do you need? You're going to review all of your applications. And really, you do have to look through them and go through them thoroughly to make sure that you've found someone who has the skills that you require. You're going to interview the most qualified applicants. Talk to them. Sit down with them. See what they have to say. You're always, always, always pretty pleased going to want to check their references in their personnel file. Someone could come in an interview and be charming and gregarious and wonderful, but if you don't look in that file, you don't know whether they have a memo that's written them up for being late 700 times in the past month, or that maybe they don't get along real well with their boss and there's a reason why they want to leave. Once you've determined that they are in fact perfect in every way, you're going to want to make that job offer. You're going to also want to understand the probationary period. How long are they on probation for? Is it a year? Is it 6 months? How long do I get to evaluate this person and ensure that they can do a good job for me? You're also going to want to provide training and coaching. This is critical for you as a manager. You have to be the one to lead and to train that person and tell them how to do their job. It's not their responsibility to figure it out. It's your responsibility to give them the tools to be able to do their job. You also have to provide ongoing and timely feedback. This includes small corrections in the moment, providing them with timely probationary reports, being able to talk to them about, some things that have popped up that you find concerning, or be able to give them positive feedback and say, gosh, you're doing a great job here. I really liked the way that you handled this last communication. You've got to monitor their performance. Is it staying consistent? Or, maybe as they get a little bit closer towards passing probation, is it sort of sliding off? Are they coming in late more often? What's happening here? And finally, if you do all of this, you should have a good return on your investment. You've got a happy, productive staff member that you've brought in, that you've trained, that you've passed on probation, who should be working for you for a good period of time. So, how do we get there? Nice for me to give an analogy and tell you all this stuff without telling you how to get there. So here's the steps that we take. The first thing that you're going to want to do is set the tone. This is part of proactive supervision. You're the example. You come in on time. You take your breaks timely, sometimes. What you do is that you come in and you show the staff how you want to behave. You are professional. You're respectful. You're communicative. You're going to want to adhere to your merit-based recruitment and selection process. I touched on that a little bit with the car analogy, but essentially what that is you do your screening matrix. You interview your candidates. You have an objective scoring criteria for your candidates, and you determine who the best person is through merit. You also provide them with onboarding. Part of onboarding is expectation setting and training and coaching. This is critical for all new staff because they don't know what's expected of them until you tell them. You're also going to provide them with timely performance feedback. This is really important because it's something that can prevent bad behavior down the road or prevent misunderstandings down the road. Finally, you're going to address distractions and poor performance. And you're going to want to do it right away because rarely have I ever seen an employee who gets better after their probationary period. Generally, it's people who sort of slide off at the end of that probationary period when they think, I'm safe. You're going to want to address that early. So I touched on this again a little bit before, but in terms of proactive supervision, what I want to impress upon you is that you are it. You are the person who has to lead by example. So whatever tone you want to set in your office, you have to ensure that you're embodying this. You have to be present and be available. I know that we're busy. I know that we have meetings. I know I have a lot of meetings, and I know I have a lot of stuff on my plate. But I still need to be there for my staff, and I still need to ensure that we have positive communication and that they can get a hold of me if they need to. And that's something that you have to ensure as well. Those one-on-one meetings, make it to those. It is really, really important that you maintain consistent communication with your staff. You're also going to want to be aware. What is going on in your office? Are your staff there? Are they engaged? Are they working on something? Do they seem frustrated by something that's happening? it's critical that you're there and that you see what's actually happening in your office. You're also responsible for protecting your employees from the awkward situation. What I mean by that is that if an employee comes to you with a little bit of a sticky situation, say, you know, Janet's wearing just a lot of perfume and it's really bothering me. I feel embarrassed. I can't say anything to her, but everybody's telling me that she stinks. It's up to you. You have to take charge of that situation. You have to speak to the employee. You have to make sure that your office environment is comfortable, safe for all of your employees. And finally, this is something that I hear sometimes. He or she has always been that way. Not anymore. We're not going to deal with that anymore. A lot of times it gets thrown around, gosh, they've been here for 12 years. They've always done this. We're just going to hope they retire. We don't want to do that. It's a terrible idea. It tanks morale in your office, and it allows people to think that they can get away with certain behaviors. It's something, and it's very difficult to come to an employee who's entrenched, who's been there for a very long time, and try to change behavior. But it is something that we have to attempt to do. There we go. So in terms of setting the tone, part of what I'm here to do today is to empower you guys as supervisors. And part of that empowerment is telling you how to set your expectations, tell you to assign tasks to your staff. You have the power to do these things. Again, as you set the tone, you set the expectation, which means you get to say, these are the tasks. Here's how we're going to divide them out. Here's the best way to do these things. It's also up to you to hold your staff accountable. And that means when your staff doesn't meet a deadline, it's following up. It's asking why. It's asking what happened. It's trying to figure out a best way to get through it in order for you guys to meet those mission-critical objectives. It also empowers you to provide performance feedback to your staff. You're not just some guy coming out in the wilderness, that's telling your staff, I think you should do things this way. This is your unit. You are the subject matter expert. You know these things, and you understand how workflow happens. You need to feel empowered to come in and provide that valuable feedback. And finally, you're empowered to do counseling and conflict resolution. And that is sometimes where it can get uncomfortable. And that is where all of us are here to help. So let's talk really briefly about the merit-based recruitment and selection. And this is the part where I'm going to put in a plug for one of the other HRU classes, which is merit-based recruitment and selection. It's a great class. What it is it talks a lot in depth about the hiring process, and it talks about really the correct way to do your merit-based recruitment and selection. But very briefly, what it is, it's essentially selection based on merit. It is based on knowledge, skills, and abilities of the candidate only. It's not whether you know them or whether they're your sister's brother-in-law, whatever. It's also based on integrity and good judgment, which means that when you're in the interview with someone, you have to sit there and you have to have that good judgment to say, is this a person who's going to fit in with my team? Something that you must do, and again, I implore you to do this, always check the file, the official personnel file, make your reference calls. There is a checklist on the intranet that you can use where the employee signs over the right to take a look at their official personnel file and their employee history. Please, please, please do that. And also, it's the law. When we talk about merit-based recruitment and selection, it's actually written into the California state law. It was written in over a period of time, and it was meant to combat the spoils system. Back when California state government was sort of getting its feet under it in the 19-teens, about 100 years ago or so, everybody was just handing out appointments to people they knew. This is my mother, this is my sister, this is my daughter, I think they'd be great for this position. Of course, they weren't always great for the position. So there were some laws enacted to combat that sort of system. So it's written into the Constitution, it's written into the Civil Service Act of 1913, and it was also, there's also a section, a Civil Service Act of 1934, that says all appointments must be based on merit. And finally, one of the consequences of that is the merit issue complaint. So the merit issue complaint is something that you probably don't hear too much about, but it's something that comes up more often now that people are gaining more knowledge about the merit system. What happens is that if someone applied for a job and they didn't get it and they felt like they should have, they can file a merit issue complaint and ask us to look into it and say, really, who got the best score here? Who should have been appointed? I feel like I was so much more qualified than the person who actually got that job. And we take a look into it and we see what happens. This is something that HR looks at first, and then it's something they can further appeal to the state personnel board. So it does have consequences. And when we ask that you engage in the merit-based recruitment and selection process, we're talking about protecting ourselves and protecting our department. And that's why it's critical to have a full hiring file. I broke it. Hooray. All right, let's talk about creating a high-performance environment. So the high-performance environment is engagement with you and your staff. It's trying to impart to them, of course, the knowledge that they need to do their jobs, but also, why are we here? This is the mission-critical objective of our division, our department. What are we doing here? And then, what's my role? A lot of times it can be difficult for employees to see whether or not, where they fit in, what they're actually doing, how they're contributing to the department as a whole. And I think it's really important to give them that macro view of what we're doing here. Also important, giving them accurate duty statements. This is something that nobody really wants to take a look at because it can be time-consuming and nitpicky, but it's really critical. It's important. The accurate duty statements are something that are great for employees because it lays out exactly what they're supposed to do in their job. So when you take a look at your duty statement, we're asking them to look at it and we're asking them to sign it. Sometimes if an employee's been there for a long time, they're many years old, I would make it a habit to take a look at them every year and say, do we still do this? Has the function of the unit changed? What happened? Have we evolved over time? And take a look at it. Make sure that they're truly up to date. And then if necessary, you can work with the staff to revise the duty statement. You had a question? So her question was, what happens if an employee is not willing to sign off on the changes to a duty statement, just for the webinar people that we have. So in that case, generally what happens is that the employee doesn't have, they're here to perform the work of the department. If the duties, if you work with human resources, our classification and pay unit is who would work with you on that duty statement. If you work with them and they fall within the classification specification, of what they do, and you're not asking them to do something that, let's say a manager would do, then they fall within the class spec and you have the right to ask them to sign that duty statement. In general, we give them about 30 days and say, please sign this within 30 days. If they do not agree with it, they may choose not to sign it, in which case you can talk to them about it and say, and let them know that this is what you have to do. They may choose to get a union representative and want to talk about it further. Fortunately for me, sorry to call you out, I have Tisha Withers here. She's our labor relations person, and she can correct me on any of this. But if the employee says, I'm going to go get a union rep and I'm not going to sign this duty statement, we might talk about it, but in general, it is what it is. You have to sign it. Do you have anything to add? And just, again, for our webinar people, thank you, Tisha. You know, them refusing to sign the duty statement does not mitigate the fact that they have to perform these duties. Okay? So what else you're going to want to have are easily accessible and up-to-date procedures. What you want to be able to do is tell the employees how to do their job. You're going to establish an expectation of professionalism, and that is, you know, professional in your communication. We treat each other here with courtesy, dignity, and respect, and it's important for you to set that tone. Establish an expectation of classification appropriate performance, and that's a little bit of what we were talking about with the duty statements. There are classification specifications for every job in the state, and those all contain, you know, what you're supposed to be doing as a state employee. You're also going to want to do something that we might overlook sometimes, a properly maintained workspace. Does everybody have the equipment that they need? Does everybody have the materials that they need to do their job? What about supplies? Do we have everything? And those seem like little things, but they're very important for you to have. And finally, you're going to want to create a workplace reflective of, again, courtesy, dignity, and respect. There we go. Onboarding, the first impression. So you've got your new staff member, you've hired your perfect person, it's awesome, bring them on board. So before they even get here, what are you going to want to do? You're going to want to have an accurate duty statement. You're going to want to have prepared their workspace and provided them with their resources. You're going to want to have a new employee welcome folder available, especially if there's someone who's new to the state. There is a host of paperwork they get to fill out, and you're going to want to make sure that they have all of that. You're going to maintain contact initiated with the interview or job offer. Sometimes it can take up to 30 days to get a new employee in, especially if they're a transfer. So you're going to want to maintain contact with them to let them know you haven't forgotten about them. They're not hanging out on a wire somewhere. You know, looking forward to having them. Here's your start date. Here's where you report. I'll meet you in the lobby. We'll get you your badge. So the arrival task. You're going to announce the new employee to your staff, introduce them to everybody and everybody that they might need to work with, and give them a tour. Let them know, where do we work? Where is everything? Where's the ATM? Where's the cafeteria? Here's where we are. You're going to schedule them for new employee orientation. This is where they'll get a good idea of, what do we do here? You're going to review their duty statement, policies, and expectations with them. And then finally, you're going to assign a lead or a buddy. I know you're busy. You know you're busy. We know you're not going to be able to answer every single little question that they're going to have. So what you're going to want to do is assign someone who's a more experienced member of your staff who also embodies the qualities that you think someone in your unit should have, and assign them to be a mentor for them so that whenever they have questions, what do I do about this? How do I do this? Someone can answer them on a fairly consistent basis. Suggested contents of a new employee welcome folder. Your new employee checklist documents, you can find those on the intranet. A welcome packet, a division phone list, commonly used division acronyms. A lot of times, even going from place to place within the state, there's a lot of acronyms, and all of them are different, and all of them stand for something different. It can help to get them acquainted to your new language to give them some division acronyms. And finally, a list of division procedures and resources. Again, the CDSS intranet has multiple resources under this new employee tab, and they can help you build your new employee welcome folder. So as you continue to onboard with your employee, what do? So you check in with them pretty casually. You talk with them. You come by their cubicle. How are you doing? How are you fitting in? What's going on today? And you do this fairly frequently. Regular one-on-one meetings. These are crucial. The reason why is because this gives them a forum to talk to you. It gives you a space to check up on the workload. And it also provides for a built-in training, mentoring, coaching period of time. What I like to do with new employees who are new to the state or new to my unit or new to anywhere really is to actually have a daily one-on-one meeting with them. I like to do this because there is a lot that we have to go through here in the performance management unit, and your units are probably similar. There's tons of laws, rules, regulations, resources, and it can be a bear to sort through all of them. And there's a lot of stuff that comes in at a fairly fast clip, and it can be difficult for a new person to get used to. What I like to do is I like to meet with them daily and say, let's go over where everything is. Let's go over what you got in today. I just do that for the first month or so to allow them to get comfortable and to allow them to find their feet. After that, I'll move to a weekly one-on-one meeting, as is regular with the rest of the staff that reports to me. I understand that not everybody may have the time or the inner fortitude to meet on a daily basis, and it might not be necessary for some of your units. But I found that it helps me, and it helps me create a good relationship with my new staff. Also, be the example. Again, this is something we've talked about beforehand. If you would like people to treat everybody else with courtesy, dignity, and respect, you treat your staff with courtesy, dignity, and respect. Develop a training plan. What does your staff need to know? What classes do they need to go to? How often do they need to go to them? Are there continuing education classes they have to go to? What do we do here? So it's something that you should be looking into, and there's many, many resources either through our workforce development folks over here or through outside entities. Also, your policies and procedures. Ensure they're there, ensure they're up to date, and ensure your staff has access to them. Again, assigning a lead or a buddy will greatly help you because it'll take some of the pressure off of you. And also telegraph to them what is acceptable in this office. You know, is it acceptable that we come in a half hour late every day? If it's not, then, you know, we tell them that. Performance feedback. So this is where you're going to want to give them frequent communication. This is where also you make your small adjustments as needed. If you see something coming up that you find concerning, or if you see something handled maybe not the right way, then fix it at the time. Don't wait. You can always come over to them and talk to them about what happened or what went wrong. You can follow up with an email. You don't have to wait for your one-on-one meeting and try to cram all of your communication into that one period of time. Come over, talk to them, fix things as they come up. Those little fixes will pay off down the road when it doesn't blow up into a much larger problem that you then have to correct. Which means that when you do have to correct something larger, you just tell them what you told them. So if you've already corrected someone on, let's take an easy one, say coming in 10 minutes late every day, then you know it's much easier to say, look, we talked about this back here, and back here, than to suddenly address it a year down the road and say, well, I know you've been coming in late for a year, but this is the first time I'm talking to you about it. Catch it as it happens and try to fix it then. Retrain them and use your email recap. You meet with your employees on a pretty frequent basis. It's helpful to have email recaps to remember what you talked to them about. And this is the sort of thing that also helps you down the road if you need to document them for any reason. So these email recaps, they're not disciplinary. They're not something bad. What they're just saying is, we had this discussion. Here's what we talked about. And then the retraining, you know, if they've been trained, maybe they need a brush up. Maybe they need to be retrained. Maybe some of it didn't sink in. But that is one of the tools at your disposal. Probationary reports. Pretty please do your probationary reports. It would be wonderful. I know that they're difficult to get to. I know that they're difficult to do. And this is a common problem amongst departments. So I'll talk to you a little bit about why we have to do them and what the consequence is. So we have to do them in part because it's the law. This is the government code. It's 19172, and it says every employee needs 3 probationary reports during their probationary period. There's a couple of reasons for this. The first of all is that while you're on probation, you don't actually have the job that you're in. The probationary period is an extension of the examination period, which means that if you came here today as a Staff Services Manager 1 because you went online and you took the test and you competed for the job and you got it because you were the best candidate, but you're on probation, you don't have that job yet. The probationary period that you are on is that extension of the examination period that says, can I do this job in a practical setting? Once that probationary period ends, you've got it. It's yours. You have passed. However, your manager or supervisor, and consequentially you as a manager and or a supervisor, have the obligation to hand down those probationary reports to check in with the employee and tell them how they're doing. Are they passing? Are they able to pass? So the other thing that it does is that if you figure out, let's say, 9 months into a year probationary period, 10 months in, if I'm not lucky, that the employee really shouldn't pass probe, that this is not a good job fit, that we really shouldn't have them on our team, and you haven't done any of your probationary reports, that's going to make my job and my staff's job a heck of a lot harder, because you have not given them the feedback that they need in order to do their jobs, in order to try and correct their jobs, or in order to try and correct their behavior for their job. So not having those probationary reports really hurts us in the end, especially if the employee is not going to work out. And finally, let's talk a little bit about the State Personnel Board finding about probationary reports. State Personnel Board comes in and does an audit of us every few years or so. And when I say us, I mean the Human Resources Services branch. What they do is they look for different things. They'll maybe look at our exam program, they'll look at our class and pay, and usually what they do is they look at our probationary reports. And they say, we've chosen these employees that you've hired in the past 18 months. How many of them have all 3 of their probationary reports complete? It's never 100%. And it isn't for most departments either. It's difficult to get the time to do them, but it's important. And those findings are published. You can find them. You can find them online. You can see how DSS did. You can see how any other state agencies who have been audited did. And usually that is an area where we fall down. And that's an area where most departments fall down. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of performance management. So I've run you through the ringer. I've made you do all this onboarding. I've made you do all this stuff. What are my benefits? What do I get out of this? You get equitable treatment of the employees. This means that your employees have all been treated the same, and they're happy about that. They understand that. There we go. You get increased productivity. You have employees who have been properly trained. They've been given feedback. They understand what's expected of them, and as a consequence, they do their jobs, which is awesome. They have opportunities for career development, which means that they've learned what they need to know, and now maybe they're a great candidate to take that next promotional step. They've got improved morale, which means that you've got improved retention. If an employee feels valued and feels like they are welcome there, feels like they're being trained, feels like they're being invested in, they want to stay. They want to be there with you guys. You get reduced grievances. If you've handled everything in a proper manner in terms of onboarding them, teaching them, making sure that they're here and here to stay, then they're less likely to grieve. They're less likely to have something to be unhappy about and less likely to go to the union about something. And finally, reduced adverse actions. If you've properly taught them, properly brought them in, corrected your behavior along the way, much less likely that we're going to have to do an adverse action down the road. So, good job, you guys. You set the tone, you observed your merit-based recruitment and selection, you've provided a consistent onboarding, you've provided timely performance feedback and addressed poor performance quickly, and as a result, you've got a team that is confident in your leadership, enjoys a safe work environment, and are secure in the knowledge that all employees are treated equitably. Trophy. So, let's move on to the next part of this, and that's where I start talking about the outlier. This is where occasionally you'll be surprised by an employee who, contrary to all of your performance management efforts, exhibits performance problems. This may be quickly and easily corrected issue or one that requires greater focus and effort. When that happens, the performance management team is here to help. So let's talk about the 3 phases of progressive discipline. The first is the preventative phase, which I've already talked about in pretty decent depth. The next is the corrective phase, and then finally it's the formal adverse action phase. So here's where you go. The performance management team is available to assist supervisors with whatever you might need. please contact us when issues first arise. We do have a general mailbox. It is at pmuconsult@dss.ca.gov, and a team member will respond within 24 hours to your request. This is a general mailbox. It's checked by an officer of the day, and it's something where we take it seriously. We respond back to you guys in a timely manner. Also, here's your analyst. And here they are over here. I brought them, plus some members of our legal team, which is wonderful. So these are our names, these are our numbers, and this is what we're responsible for. That's me up top. Veronica over here is, she does special projects for me. She does a lot of training, and she handles some of the exec offices. Michelle over here is my supervisor, and she oversees the analyst. Rachel Brown over here, she does admin, CCL North, and the now defunct HRCS. Stacy Brown over here, she does CDSD South, APD, and CCL South. Kevin Waite over here does State Hearing Divisions, ISD, and Welfare to Work. And Tricia over here does Legal, CFSD, and DDSD North. Names, numbers, here's how you find us. So if you have any questions, these are your resources. These are my superstars. These are the people who are going to help you guys out. Let's talk a little bit about an emergency. So I just want to put this out there so that you know where to go should you have something come up that is critical. So employee reports an incident to a manager or supervisor. Is it an emergency? Is it an active threat? Is there bodily harm, or is it likely? Is there a weapon involved? If yes, don't call me, call 911. Report it, and then second, you're going to report it to the health and safety emergency line, and then you're going to elevate it to your next level manager. If this is a no, if it's not an emergent situation, then you review and report the incident. So what's the incident? Does the employee believe that the basis of misconduct was due to a protected class, if they were discriminated against, or if there was sexual harassment? They're going to want to contact the Equal Employment Opportunity Office, and that is their general number. And that's something that you would have an obligation to do as well. Is it not on the basis of a protected class? And do they believe that they were threatened by words, actions, or statements? If yes, then please contact the health and safety section, and they'll be able to guide you through what to do next. If no, if it's neither discrimination, sexual harassment, or a health and safety concern, then you can contact us, and we can talk you through what to do next. What happened here? What do we need to do? So I'm going to really briefly skim over the preventative phase because, again, we've already sort of talked about that. But this is the first phase of progressive discipline, and it's by far the one that's going to take up the biggest chunk of your time. By following the principles of performance management, you've already addressed the progressive phase, or preventative phase, excuse me. This phase prevents poor performance and misconduct through sound candidate selection techniques, duty statements and written expectations, training, timely feedback and small corrections, timely probationary reports, and annual performance appraisals. So you did all 3 of your probationary reports, but sorry, you're still on the hook for a yearly IDP for your employees. It's a check-in for them and for you to see how well they're doing and what areas they can continue to grow in. So let's move on to the corrective phase. This is going to be the phase where you identify and address performance deficiencies and ask the employee to improve. So you may have the private performance discussion. And when you're correcting an employee, it's a potentially embarrassing thing. It's not something that you want to have in a cubicle. So you want to find a private place, an office, or a conference room where you can sit down and you can honestly discuss with them. You may use the work improvement plan. This is something that different divisions may use, and it talks a lot about, here's what we're going to do to improve the quality of your work. Here are the steps we're going to take. And here's the time in which I'd like to see improvement in that work product. You'll go over your written procedures and your process review. Is there something that they're just not getting? Is there a link that's missing somewhere where they're not really sure where to go or what to do once the project reaches a certain point? You reset your expectations. Hopefully you've already set your expectations, which means that you just need to remind the employees about this. what are you expected to do? Are you expected to be professional? Are you expected to meet your deadlines? Hopefully all of those things. But you'd go over with them with that again. Agree upon a time frame to just demonstrate improvement. How much time are you willing to give them to try and turn it around? Are we looking for improvement within 60 days, 90 days? What do your projects look like? What does your workload look like? Communicate that with them and clearly set those expectations. The frequency of follow-up meetings. How often are you going to check in with them? Is it going to be during your one-on-one? Is it going to be, we're going to meet twice a week now? What's it going to be? And then you're going to summarize a discussion in an email to the employee. You do not want to lose all of the things that you've said or have it be lost to memory. So you want to write it down. You want to put it in an email. If poor performance continues after the initial performance discussion, you progress to a performance document. It's going to be either a counseling or corrective memo as advised. Hopefully this is the stage where we would become involved with you guys, where we would start to talk to you about, gosh, this employee just is not, they're not getting it. They're not getting better. Their behavior's not changing or their performance isn't changing. We would be talking with you about whether it should be a counseling or a corrective memo. The document details the issues, steps taken to correct the issues, training to assist with the issues, potentially the Bazemore warning, which I'll talk more about a little bit, and an EAP referral. You will schedule the discussion. The contents of the memorandum should not be a surprise to the employee. This means that this shouldn't just come out of nowhere. You should have already had that initial performance discussion with them that says, hey, this behavior isn't acceptable, so that when they get a corrective memo, they realize this is just a follow-up on the things that I've continued to fail to do or haven't done yet. Seek labor relations officer input if the employee requests representation. We try to work hand in hand with our labor relations partners, and we want to make sure that we respect the employee's rights to representation while also protecting the department. And the best people to advise you on that is going to be our Labor Relations Bureau. And finally, provide the employee with reasonable time to correct the behavior. It's not reasonable to expect them to correct it by that afternoon sometimes. But if it's performance, if it's something, where they need a little bit of time to be able to turn around a better product for you, figure out what a reasonable period of time is going to be for them. So let's talk about my friend Carla Bazemore. This was a state personnel board decision back in 1996, and this was about a woman named Carla Bazemore, who is a DGS janitor. So Ms. Bazemore had been given various memos related to unprofessional behavior. After she was disciplined, Ms. Bazemore noticed that some of the changes in the adverse action were previously the subject of the memos that she had received. She argued that certain charges in the action should be dismissed because she had been previously disciplined with those memos. SPB rejected that argument, but they were concerned with how the memos were written. So the administrative law judge noted specific language that should be used in corrective writing, and that language is called the Bazemore language. And this is what it is verbatim. Your conduct on this occasion was unacceptable and will not be tolerated by this department. If you engage in similar misconduct, similar conduct in the future, the department will take adverse action against you based on the incidents cited in this memorandum, as well as any future incidents. So what that means is that I have the right to use this memo in an adverse action against you. It's not double jeopardy. We get to use it again if we feel that your behavior has not changed. So that is something that is important for corrective memos. And we use it when an employee's behavior has escalated to the point where we truly need to correct them on their behavior. I put in some slides to talk about some of the more prevalent issues that we find with performance management. The first one is going to be poor attendance. This is something that we see pretty consistently, and it's one of the most common questions we get. You've noticed that your employee calls in frequently, is consistently tardy, and you never seem to be able to find them. What do you do? Have you spoken to the employee to discuss their schedule? and where they are. This could be a really quick fix. It could just be that you're not aware of what the employee's schedule is, or that they have an RDO, or that they have lunch at a weird time. It's important to open up that first line of communication with them. Are you allowing them to make up time on a frequent basis? If you've got an employee who is consistently late or consistently calling in, consistently wants to make up time, then it may be time to stop that. It may be okay to allow some employees in your unit to make up time on an infrequent, potentially as-needed basis. But if you've got an employee who's abusing that particular system, then you have the right to put a stop to it and to say, no, you will need to post time for the time that you were late this morning. That's something that you should take a look at within your unit. Some units or bureaus or branches don't allow for makeup time at all. Some do. So it may differentiate depending on where you are. Is the employee experiencing medical issues? Are they protected by FMLA? That's the Family Medical Leave Act if they have a serious health condition or have a family member who has a serious health condition. You know, are they protected? Is this a medical issue that they have to take care of? Does the employee have a current or ongoing reasonable accommodation? If they do, you should be familiar with what that is and what they need in order for them to do their job. Does the employee have a current or ongoing workers' compensation claim? This, again, critical. You generally get some notice from the doctor or from our workers' compensation unit that says, here's when the employee can work. Here's what they need in order to do their work. Are they going to be off work for a period of time? All of that is important information for all of you guys to have. The attendance restriction memorandum. This is something that will come in after you've got an employee who has a noted period of absences, of perhaps AWOL absences, an employee who can't either seem to be able to come in on time or consistently misses work. The attendance restriction memorandum is something that we can use to put them on notice. Hey, this isn't something that's acceptable anymore. And if we're at that point, this is something that we can all assist you with. Medical verification. This is determined by the bargaining unit contract. A lot of the questions that we get are, can I ask for a doctor's note? And that's dictated by bargaining unit contract. So depending on what type of employee you supervise, this is something that you should absolutely check into. You can find all those bargaining unit contracts on the CalHR website. And most of them do allow for you to ask for a medical note under certain circumstances. And again, this is something that we can talk to you about. Finally, absence without leave and AWOL separation. Absence without leave is, well, sort of the absence of a leave type. One of the most frequent questions we get is, what's the difference between DOC and AWOL? DOC is approved. If an employee takes DOC time, that's an approved leave. They may not be getting paid for that day, but it's still approved. It indicates that you saw that and you were okay with them taking that day off or taking that hour off, going to that doctor's appointment. If it is AWOL, it indicates that it is without leave. You may have seen it, but you don't approve it. And what you're saying is, no, I didn't authorize you to take that leave, but you took it anyway. That is AWOL. So there is no unapproved DOC, which is something that I've heard over and over again throughout the department. There's no unapproved DOC. DOC is either authorized or it's AWOL. So that's something that if you take away anything, take that one away. Corrective phase, poor attendance. If your employee is experiencing medical issues, some of these may come into play. A leave of absence. If an employee is experiencing serious medical issues, they may need to take a leave at a certain point in time. If they do, then they may be eligible for state disability insurance, SDI, or non-industrial disability insurance, NDI. And those are things that you would work with your personnel unit to figure out for that employee. And you would keep track of when they're expected to come back to work. Fitness for duty examination. These are rare and lengthy. This is when you notice an employee's behavior start to deteriorate. And you feel as though there may be a medical issue wrong with them, but there's no doctor's note forthcoming. You don't really know. The department has the right to send an employee to a medical appointment and to get them checked out by a doctor. This is not something we do lightly. This is usually something we do as a last resort, and it is not something that we do frequently. So if you have any questions about an employee who may be experiencing medical issues, we can talk to you about them, but a fitness for duty will rarely be the answer. Options letters. Return to work. If you've got an employee who's been out on a leave of absence for a long period of time, it may be feasible to send them an options letter that talks about what are we going to do next. So are we going to return to work with or without a reasonable accommodation? Are we going to go on a temporary separation, which is a leave of absence, SDI, etc.? Or is a permanent separation necessary, which might be disability retirement, resignation? There's other options there. If any of your issues start to venture into this medical arena, what we're going to do is we're going to help you work hand in hand with the Risk Management Bureau and the Human Resources Branch. They are well versed in this. They can talk to you about medical issues, and they have the authorization to reach out to the doctors if it's a reasonable accommodation situation, for example. Okay, so we've reached the third phase of the progressive discipline. And finally, we're at the adverse action phase. So you worked with your employee, you did all of your preventative phase stuff, you onboarded them, you gave them their duty statement, you corrected them again, you corrected them some more, you gave us a call, you corrected them some more. And finally, we got to do an adverse action. Nothing is getting through to them. So what you're going to do is you're going to assemble all of the documentation collected on the performance issue and prepare a revised CS366 request for adverse action. This packet is going to include things like your probationary reports or your annual performance appraisal, counseling and corrective memoranda, all of it. Email documentation, including your emails to yourself on events and activities. Sometimes you might find it useful to send an email to yourself to remind you of what happened during the day. Those are admissible. Relative work product documents. So if we're alleging that they can't do their work, we have to show their work. Training and coaching efforts. What did you do? Did you teach them? Did you mentor them? Did you meet with them on a one-on-one basis? What training classes did you send them to? MSA and range change denials. Have you been noticing them? You know, hey, you're not getting your MSA this time around because you can't do your work. Witness statements, if applicable. So, you know, if they, for example, have a behavior issue, if they yell at people, if your other staff is being made uncomfortable by them and have come to you to complain, a witness statement may be appropriate, and that's something that we may ask for. At the bottom line, what we want is document, document, document. Document everything. Email is your friend. So, you know, write down as much as you can, and it can only help you down the road. For the adverse action phase, when we're about to enter into this, we may participate in a collaborative meeting. That would include performance management units, so my staff, legal division, who would help us out on the legalities. The Equal Employment Opportunity Office, if it's applicable, if it's something that ventured into discrimination or sexual harassment. The Health and Safety Office, if it's something that ventured into violence in the workplace. And again, labor relations, if applicable. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a rejection during the probationary period. Rejections are different from adverse actions. They are not actually disciplinary in nature. What a rejection is saying is this is not a good fit for the job. And again, because you are still in the examination process of the job, what it's saying is you didn't pass the exam. It's an extension. It's an opportunity to determine if the employee is capable of performing as required by the classification specification. Are they capable of performing as an analyst or as a manager or as whatever class they're in? It follows the same preventative and corrective phase process. You're still going to onboard the employee. You're still going to teach them everything you can, and you're still going to document if they do something wrong or if they have behavior or performance issues. You do not have to wait until the end of the probationary period to reject an employee. Please don't wait until the end of the probationary period to reject an employee. In most cases, you have a year to evaluate them. In some cases, you have 6 months. But what we are requesting is that you turn it into us at least 60 days in advance. This gives us the time to write this document. It gives us the time to sift through the performance. And it gives us time to evaluate whether we can do this. So that is a great, good courtesy to us if you submit it to us more than 60 days before the probationary period ends. The probationary period rules are strict. If we do not serve an employee by the last day of their probationary period, they're ours. We married them. Unless they went on leave or unless they took a 2-month-long vacation, we don't get to extend their probationary period except for 5 days in order to serve them. So that's not a significant period of time. Do your onboarding, do your evaluations, figure out if you want to keep that employee or not. And then this one is a priority task for performance management, and it's placed ahead of adverse action. The reason why is because of the extremely strict deadline. So the rejections, they're always going to take priority. I'll talk a little bit about employee appeal rights. CDSS, the respondent, we will serve the notice of adverse action or rejection during probation on the employee. The employee, who is the appellant, has the right to a departmental level hearing, what's called a Skelly hearing, as the first level of due process. That means that they have the right to appeal to someone within the department who we designate to say, I don't think this is fair. I think this was taken against me because they don't like me or because they're discriminating against me or what have you. But they have the right to have that hearing. They also have the right to file with the State Personnel Board within 30 days. SPB will then schedule a pre-hearing settlement conference, which is addressed by our legal division. Over there. But that's addressed by our legal division. And they may talk with the employee and or their representative about what can we do to settle this? What can we do to ensure that there's a win for both of our parties? Appellant and respondent may settle, or they may not be able to come to an agreement, in which case the appeal goes to the State Personnel Board. So let's talk a little bit about the Skelly hearing. The Skelly hearing comes out of a precedential decision, Skelly versus the State Personnel Board in 1975, and it holds that a permanent civil service employee has a right to pre-removal safeguards, including the Skelly rule, which provides for a pre-deprivation hearing and notice. What that means is that the employee in the state of California, and as a state employee, essentially has a property right to their job. And since we are attempting to modify that job or take that job away from them, they have the right to appeal to us to say, I don't think you should have done that. The Skelly period is dependent upon classification. Generally, it's 5 days. That's almost always what it is. It also gives rise to factors to consider when determining the appropriate disciplinary penalty. What they may consider is harm to the public service, likelihood of recurrence, and the circumstances surrounding the misconduct. So you may say that an employee is wildly unprofessional in the workplace, but if every single one of your other staff is also wildly unprofessional in the workplace, this may provide a little bit of context. So with a rejection during probation, the burden of proof is on the employee to prove that we did them wrong, that we discriminated against them in some way. The employee has to prove that. And then they may get their penalty modified if they can. The adverse action, the burden of proof is on us. It's on the employer to prove that we did everything we could and this employee was not able to meet our standards or was not able to conduct themselves in a professional manner. The importance of Skelly documents. Our adverse action or rejection during probation, it's all those Skelly documents. That is our evidence. That is what everything is based on. So those are critical for us. That is what the actual adverse action is. The big, beautiful paper that we write before that is merely the notice. It tells them, here's what's in these documents, and here's why it's important. Those documents that you provide us, that's everything. It's critical. And we go through each and every single piece of evidence to make sure that it says what we're alleging it says, and also to make sure that we're doing things correctly. Let's get back a little bit to an emergency so that we can talk about what's an emergent situation. An emergency is a situation that poses an immediate risk to life, health, property, or environment. Again, if you have an emergency, please call these units in this order: 911, health and safety, performance management, and then our legal division. The reason why you would call us at the end is just to loop us in to figure out, what happened, what can we do to help you, what can we do to assist you. The two up front are to ensure the health and safety of everybody involved and potentially everybody in the building. Part of the emergency situation is addressing what's happening in your unit. If you are faced with an immediate issue in your branch, such as a coworker hitting an employee, a coworker blocking someone's path, a coworker sexually harassing an employee, or an employee showing major signs of stress, immediately put a stop to the situation. This is part of your role as a manager or a supervisor. You have to stop it. You have to ensure the health and safety of your staff. Depending on the situation, the impacted employee may need certain types of paperwork. That paperwork is going to be employee assistance program information. Here, this is a service that we provide to all state employees. You can call them anytime. Workers' compensation information. If something happened on the workplace, or if, again, the employee is showing major signs of stress, they are entitled to the workers' compensation information, and they may have to file it. Reasonable accommodation paperwork, if there's some kind of physical or mental medical issue at play. In this case, it's better to be safe than sorry. Give them everything that we've got and let them make the decision as to what they need in order to continue to do their job. Equal employment opportunity paperwork, if it might involve harassment or discrimination. Again, if you see a coworker sexually harassing an employee, this is something EEO needs to know about. And FMLA paperwork for medical and stress issues. It could be that the employee has a serious health condition and is entitled to FMLA. Here's some additional consideration. You're going to need to calm down the employee. Email them all the paperwork. Tell them we'll begin an investigation, if it's warranted, into the matter right away. Do not discuss the particulars of any investigation. ATO. You may determine that it is best to send the affected employee home for the day, but you may only do this with agreement from your deputy. So ATO is not something that a manager or supervisor can authorize on their own. Deputy directors can authorize it, as can the personnel officer. But that's pretty much it. So if you need to send an employee home, when we send them home, what we're saying is, we're going to pay you for this. Go. But you need authorization from your deputy. This practice helps protect the department from future claims that we did nothing to help them. So by providing this paperwork to the employee, by attempting to take care of the affected and impacted employee, what we're doing is we're protecting the department from liability as well. We're saying, we're the good and benevolent employer, and we're here to help you. Do this even if you're 100% sure the employee is being untruthful. We treat all of our employees equally. In doing so, again, we shield the CDSS from liability. Egregious acts. So for egregious misconduct, such as the thing that I was talking about before, hitting, sexually harassing, things like that, progressive discipline, not always applicable. Use and understand employee-assigned authorizations to prove that the employee understood the policies. So at the beginning of the job here, and probably every year, the employee needs to sign off, yes, I understand that I will not discriminate against people. Yes, I understand that I will not sexually harass people. Yes, I understand that I will not hit people. All these things. And if the employee has signed all of these, you can prove, we gave these to you. You know about this. A reasonable person should know about this, but you signed off that you know about this. Use corrective memos with policies attached to prove that the employee was fully warned and trained. If a milder incident had happened in the past and you determined that it was appropriate just to write the employee up, maybe it was concerning language, there may be a pattern of behavior that you can point to and say, you were warned, you were told about this. If a reasonable person would find the act threatening, report it on a Gen 1311 to the Health and Safety section for assessment. And I actually need to update that because now they have a Workplace Violence Prevention Program Manager. His name is Steve Baker. They have their own mailbox as well. So he handles all of these incoming. and he's the point person for figuring out, does this rise to the level of workplace violence? How should this be handled? A note on zero tolerance policies. Zero tolerance does not mean that we will dismiss an employee for violating the policy. It does mean that we will discipline them in a way proportional to the misconduct. So this doesn't mean that automatically an employee gets fired if they do something that may violate the policy. What it does is it ensures that we will take a look at it consistently to see, okay, what did they do? How proportionate should our response be? And we want to ensure that we are fair and equitable to these employees, especially as looking back in the past and seeing what have we done with other employees who have had similar incidences. So I wanted to talk a little bit about strategies here too, especially if you're faced with a problem employee. What are you going to want to do? So move on discipline quickly. What you can do is you can use, for example, 30-day segments. If you've got an employee who's a consistent problem and you just know when you go in that morning that something's going to happen today or this week because it happens every day or every week, you can look at it in 30-day segments if you don't have time to write a corrective memo every day. You can say, okay, after the first 30 days, discipline. Let's talk about a corrective memo. Here's what's happened over the past 30 days. Look at the next 30 days. Discipline. What has happened? This allows you to build corrective memos, and it also moves us towards an adverse action, potentially a lesser adverse action. A lesser adverse action is defined as anything where the penalty is 5% for 4 months or below. So that would include a pay reduction of that caliber or below, or an official reprimand, which we very rarely use. For the record, there are 5 different types of adverse actions. There's an official letter of reprimand, a pay reduction, a suspension, a demotion, and dismissal. That's it. Those are the 5. The pay reduction can vary. The suspension can vary in days. But that's what we have to work with when we're looking at discipline. Use lesser adverse actions as a way to build up to formal progressive discipline. These tend to be shorter actions, and we don't need as many allegations or as much documentation. Lesser adverse actions are effective if you're planning on demoting or dismissing someone in the future. We tend to use lesser adverse actions, things like pay reductions and a demotion and potentially a dismissal, if we have an employee who simply can't do the work of their position, who are simply not able to or not capable. Because what we're alleging here is essentially we're alleging incompetence. We're alleging, gosh, you just don't seem to be able to do it. If there's things like egregious behavior, misconduct, blowing up at people, we may not need to go down that progressive discipline path. We may be able to jump, for example, straight to dismissal, depending on how egregious it is. Suspensions are highly visible. Ensure your business needs can handle the missing employee, and that also if they're actually on pay status. So when you consider a suspension, and that's something that we would talk with you and your affected deputy about, a suspension sends a message. If somebody is not in the workplace for a week or a month, people notice. And if they're not getting paid for that time, they're going to notice. So that's something that you may do to send a message to say, no, you're not going to be in the workplace because your presence here is more disruptive than not. And frequently it is used for disruptive employees. But again, it's going to matter based on whether you need that person in the office or not. It may be more effective to have them on a pay reduction where they're in the office and they're working, but their pay is getting docked. So these are some things that we consider when we talk to you about penalty and what we need to move towards. Look for ways to reduce any of the employee's potential defenses as you are addressing a complex case with a long-term strategy. So discrimination. A lot of times if an employee feels the heat, feels the pressure, knows that something's coming, knows that they're not able to do the job, they may allege, they just don't like me. They're discriminating against me because X, Y, Z. The way that we combat that is that we ensure that they are given, if they file something, for example, if they say, my supervisor just doesn't like me because she's a woman and I'm a man, and they file something with the EEO, we ensure that they're given a full and fair investigation. And we say, okay, we'll take a look at your claim. Reasonable accommodation should always be provided to them if they're alleging any sort of medical issue. If the employee says, well, the reason why I can't do my job is because I have this medical issue, we ensure that that's taken care of. We say, okay, what do you need to do your job? Disparate treatment. We ensure that we do not target the employee regarding workplace issues. So a lot of times, an employee may say, again, they don't like me, they're treating me differently. It may be because of discrimination. It may just be because they don't like me because I bake better cookies than she does. So what we do to combat that is that we assign our expectations to the entire branch rather than just to an employee. We make sure that we're treating everybody consistently and fairly. Those expectations that we set in the beginning, we have to ensure that we're setting them for all of the employees. We don't have different standards for one employee over another. So again, you have a branch-wide reminder to be professional instead of one just directed at an employee. After a while, if an employee continues to misbehave, they single themselves out with that behavior. And that's how you apply the corrective measures. You say, hey, I set expectations for everybody. Everybody else here is professional. You're the one who's not being professional, and that's why I'm talking to you and not to everybody else. But that can only happen after you've already set that expectation for everybody. Okay, it's time to do an exercise. Lucky you guys. I'm going to pass out some slips of paper. You want to help me? And we'll pair up the tables, and they've just got some scenarios for you guys to address. And then I'll have you guys talk them over for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about them. Okay. Have you guys all had enough time to discuss your scenarios? Does anybody need more time? Okay, fabulous. Then you guys get to talk to me about it. Who's got number one? One of the groups, I know someone does. You do? Talk to me about it. Read it out loud to me and tell me what you guys think.
All right, yeah, your employee Steve has shown up tardy to work 3 times this week. He has had attendance issues in the past and even had an attendance memorandum, but had been doing better this month. What is your first step? So we decided first we call him in to see what's going on. That might be a possible reasonable accommodation that is going on either on a temporary basis or a new permanent basis. Also, we would remind him of the attendance memorandum during that step.
Yeah, those are some good steps. So if you've got an employee who has had an attendance problem in the past, this isn't something that's new. Hopefully you've already talked to him about it before. But you're right. You do call him in and you talk to him about it and you say, what's going on? This has sort of gotten better. And then you have that discussion and you are able to suss out from that, hopefully, is there a medical issue? Is there something I need to be concerned about here where, maybe there is an underlying medical issue. Once we get that taken care of, then we can move on to the, you really got to be here on time. And then from there, you can sort of step it up to your corrective memo if necessary. Maybe the next time that he's late, maybe it's time. Okay? Good answer. Number two? Who's got number two? Way in the back. Okay, hang on, I'm running.
Okay, one of Sarah's duties is to proofread and correct reports for your deputy director. You're finding that the report still contains spelling, grammatical, and formatting errors. Sarah has been your employee for 2 months. What is your first step? We decided the first step should be to call her in and talk to her about her, and review her duty statement and make sure she understands what her duties are, and make sure she understands that she can take her time and go back and check, and then determine if there's an extra training that's needed.
Okay, good. Anybody else who had number two had anything else to contribute?
Yeah, we thought it was really important to make sure that the employee understood the expectations and also understanding the impacts of how these typos kind of roll down and result in something that can be a huge issue for the department as a whole.
Yeah, you guys have good responses to this. So here's what sticks out to me on that one. She's got a lot of typing, spelling, grammatical errors. She's been here for 2 months. Likely she's an office technician, right? That's sort of what you're thinking if she's doing this proofreading and she's sort of doing this grammatical check. An office technician has a 6-month probationary period. How long are you going to be willing to let this go on? So she's been in the job for 2 months. You're absolutely correct. You should be setting your expectations. You should be explaining the importance. You should be assessing whether training is necessary. But you're also going to want to take a look at, okay, I've sent her to Better Business Writing. I've talked to her about this. I've set the expectations. But oh my gosh, my deputy just cannot continue to go on with these spelling, typing, grammatical errors in their document. It might be time to consider a rejection during probation. And this is something where if a critical function of your job is making sure that these reports are error-free and she can't do that, then are we doing her a kindness by letting her stay here? So if you're 2 months in, be cognizant of that probationary period. You've only got 6 months. What are we going to do? Okay? Who's got number 3? I know someone does. Here we go. Number 3 says, you have just hired Mike, a new staff service analyst. It is his first day and you have already arranged for his workspace, email, account, and badge. You have a meeting scheduled with Mike this morning. What will you go over with him? And we decided to go over any department paperwork that needs to be filled out. And expectations could be the expectations memo, lunch schedule, time reporting, any procedures and policies that we also have that pertain to the department on his hiring, do an introduction to staff, and also introduce him to his buddy. tour buildings, make sure he's got supplies, and also do a quick chat to find out what their expectations and goals are now that they've gotten this job and they're here. What are they going to do? That's a great answer. Does anybody else have number 3 and have anything they want to add? Oh.
Go over training needs.
Okay.
They're going to have one-on-ones. Going to be checking in with them daily. Where all their resources are available.
Fabulous. Yeah, you guys have really hit all the marks on this one. So it's almost like you've brought new employees in before. These, it's a great thing to do onboarding. And it's really important to give them all this stuff up front. And, you know, I know that a lot of it can be overwhelming because who knows, you know, there's so much paperwork and there's so much to learn and there's so much new. But since you guys are these compassionate, wonderful managers who have brought your brand shiny new employee in, you are committed to making them feel comfortable during this process and to ensuring that they know that they can come to you if they have any questions. Those are great answers. Who's got number 4? Okay.
Okay, number 4, you are a new manager to your unit and you have begun setting up one-on-one meetings with each member of your staff. Laura, an AGPA who has been with the unit for 12 years, declines your one-on-ones and states that she will not agree to one-on-one meetings without a union representative present. What do you do? So we discussed this, and one point would be that we would instill the purpose of the one-on-one meetings and also address any concerns that she may have about those. And then at that point, we would say that we would think about what we have discussed and would get back to her. Following that, I would follow up with an email just accounting as to what was discussed, and then go to labor relations and have a discussion as to what had transpired. More than likely, they would advise that that is not something that would be required. So I would get back to the employee stating that, you know, I've thoughtfully looked into this and am declining her request. If she still does not show up for her one-on-one meetings, then I would have some dialogue around that, letting her know that that is an expectation per our discussion the week prior. Capture that via email as well. And at a third time, if she still does not show up, then I would start a corrective action memo accounting for what has transpired.
All right, fabulous. Yes, you're absolutely correct. You know, one-on-one meetings are normal business operations. There's something that you and your staff regularly do, and there's something that you need in order to make sure that your unit functions. And in general, you know, not in specific cases, but in general, more likely than not, the employee doesn't have the right to representation during normal business proceedings. So that's absolutely correct. You would treat her request thoughtfully. You would absolutely follow up with our Labor Relations Bureau. But you would also, you know, be empowered to decline it and to say, nope, we need to move forward, so we're going to, and then you would correct her down the line if she still refuses to comply. Fabulous. Number 5.
You have been a supervisor in your unit for approximately 5 years. You come in late and leave early sometimes. You have been known to take long lunches with friends. You have noticed that several of your otherwise good employees are starting to show up to work late and aren't back at their desk when you need them. What do you do?
So this is a two-phase answer. One is you want to correct, as a manager, you want to correct what you're doing. So you want to make sure you start showing up to work on time, less long lunches, and then leaving on time. The second part is you're correcting an employee's actions, right? So the employee has expectations of being there on time, leaving on time, and taking the right amount of lunch. So you're addressing the issue that you're having with that employee, not your own issue when you're addressing it with employees. So it's important to address that particular situation, not your own.
You're absolutely correct, and sorry for the mean one. The mean one that implies that you're maybe falling down on the job as a supervisor a little bit. So yes, absolutely. You do have to look at home and correct your own behavior. Make sure that you are setting the example that you want for your unit. And once you've done that, you're correct. You set those expectations. You make sure that the employee's aware, that they know, that they say, hey, you know what, I might have taken some long lunches in the past, but new day. Here we are. We're all going to move forward as a unit together. Okay, so great, you guys. Did anybody else have number 5 and have anything else to add? All right.
I just thought it was important, kind of what you guys were alluding to, is even as a manager, not above falling on your own sword, because the employees are going to say, like, look at you. Look at what you're doing. So I think it's important, like, yes, like you said, that I have also taken long lunches or long breaks also, but I'm going to correct that. I have expectations, not only of you guys, but of myself also. I'm going to adhere to that. So we're all going to adhere to those guidelines together. So.
Yeah, and you're right. It doesn't feel good to be a hypocrite, right?
Right.
So you want to make sure that, you are modeling that behavior and that you set that example and that you talk to them about it. And it's always good if you are in an environment where you can have an open environment to talk about things. It makes it a healthy workspace. All right, so thank you guys for participating with me on the exercises. Those were all great answers. I wanted to expose you guys to the resources before I wrap it up and ask for some questions. So our resources here, we have HRU presentations, including the merit-based recruitment and selection. Again, it's a great class, and it talks you through the hire file, the interview process, the screening matrix, all that fun stuff. They do have an onboarding training as well, so they'll go even more in depth onto what do you do now that you've got this new person, and of course, performance management. CalHR is actually a wonderful resource. There is a CalHR Supervisor's Guide to Employee Discipline. It is online. It's just on the CalHR website, and when you get to it, it talks about the 3 phases of discipline, and it is something that you can just refer back to if you need to. There's also the bargaining unit contracts. On the CalHR website, you can get to the most current bargaining unit contracts, as well as the historical ones if you're interested. But the current year ones are the ones that you're going to be most intrigued by. They address a lot of different things. They talk about sick leave, vacation time. They talk about when you can ask for a doctor's note. They've got tons of great information in there. And it's important for you to know where they are, and also to know that Labor Relations is available to assist you on any sticky contract questions. And also the State Personnel Board. That is where they house all the precedential decisions, including the Bazemore decision, which we discussed earlier. And they have the appeals information webpage. So if you're curious about the process after we serve an adverse action and an employee wants to appeal to the State Personnel Board, they go into the process there. So, course objectives confirmation. Do you now know the definition of performance management? I'm waiting for answers. Thank you. Do you now understand the supervisor's roles and responsibilities? Do you now know the components of performance management? Do you now know the benefits of performance management? Do you now understand the progressive discipline process? And do you now know how to tap into your resources? Good, thank you. And finally, questions. I know we have some on the webinar, but why don't we go through the webinar questions really quickly, and then we can open it up to the floor here.
Can you hear me? Okay, the first one is merit-based recruitment and selection. We've been patiently waiting since the beginning of February for HR to share, number 1, selection criteria matrix and interview scoring template. It'd be great if these helpful templates could be shared.
Okay, so this is taken care of by the Personnel Bureau, of which we are a part, but the selection matrix training, I believe, is given by Maureen Graber, who is our personnel officer. I don't know where they are in sharing these templates, but I do know that once you attend the training, they do have extensive examples during the training. So that is something that I would recommend taking a look into.
Next one is, how long should we be maintaining the interviewee files?
Ooh, you guys are going to hate this one. So it used to be 3 years. It is now 5 years. You get to maintain it for 5 years. That is how, because we do keep those on hand. They are audited, and a new regulation just got put in place that says 5 years, please. Can you scan the documents in? I believe scanning is acceptable as long as we retain them. Thank you.
Can ATO be used during holiday time? For example, time off during Christmas Eve or New Year's. ATO was offered, but we had one employee claim ATO.
ATO? So ATO is approved time off. During holiday time, for example, if an employee wanted Christmas Eve off, every year the governor grants holiday ITO. And it means that the employee loses 5% of their pay every month for 4 months. That equals out, it shakes out to about a day of pay. That can go up to, let's say, 10% for 12 months. That's one of the more severe pay reduction penalties. And that's for when you want an employee in the office to continue working, but an adverse action needs to be taken. So that's what the pay reduction generally is for, and that's going to be one of your first stepping stones to a greater adverse action should their behavior not turn around. A suspension, again, I discussed that a little bit earlier, but highly visible. They generally range, they can be any number of days. You can suspend someone for 1 day. You can suspend someone for 90 days. There are some classifications that do not allow for pay reductions. So for example, bargaining unit 2, I believe bargaining unit 16, those would be your attorneys and your doctors. We can't hit them with pay reductions, but we can suspend them. Suspension is similar to a pay reduction in that it docks your pay. It just does so over, that period of time. So a suspension, again, highly visible, sends a message, can really cause an employee to lose out on a chunk of pay for a chunk of time. A demotion is where, in general, it's not going to be the first adverse action you take. It does take some pretty good documentation to get to a demotion. And what you're truly proving is that the employee cannot perform the job that they are currently in. So when you're demoting someone, what you're saying is, you're a staff services analyst, but you cannot do analytical work. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried and I've trained and I've trained and I've trained, and you've had this pay reduction, and I still can't get you to write a report. That's when you may say, however, I think you might be able to do office technician duties. You might be able to handle the level of technical proficiency or level of responsibility that comes with being an office tech. And it's a way to try and accommodate an employee without having them lose their job. So is it a penalty? Absolutely. But is it something where we're trying to shift, we're trying to hope that it works out for the employee if they're in a different job, that maybe they'll still be able to be a productive member of your unit? Yeah, it's a possibility. And then finally, there's dismissal. It does take some time to get there if it's just an employee who can't seem to function at their job level. Generally, it's something that we build up to if it's the case of an employee just can't function in that job. However, if there's an egregious act, if a coworker, walks in and hits someone, we may be able to go to a dismissal. So it just sort of depends. It can be a little bit variable, but in general, those are the five disciplinary actions.
Okay, last question is, please review when a PS 366 is used. This would be helpful to have that form in the presentation.
Thank you. It probably would be. So yes, a PS 366 is a request for adverse action or rejection during probation. The form can be found on the intranet, and what it is it's saying, I need an adverse action or a rejection during probation. It's signed off by your levels of management, so if you're the one who originates it, you would attach all of your documentation to it and give us the reasons why. Why is this action being requested? This is severe. What's happening? And it's signed off by you, your manager, and the deputy director. So the deputy has to approve that this comes to us. And then this is what we take in, and this is all the documentation that we start sifting through to put together your adverse action or your rejection during probation, which means that we want all of the documentation we can get. We're going to continue to be in contact with you, probably to talk to you about status, and also to talk to you about, oh, hey, do you recall the date for this? Do you have the documentation for this? Let's talk about how all these pieces fall into place. And likely we'll be talking to you as a subject matter expert. We work in HR. We're an admin. We are not out surveying facilities or doing research or, doing any number of things that we do throughout the department. So we may ask you to explain, why is this important? What does this mean here? This just looks like a regular email to me. Why is this, why did this make you aghast? So we're going to ask you to explain all these different things and all the criticalities to us so that we can accurately represent our position in the notice of adverse action or rejection during probation. Any other webinar questions?
Can the department go to dismissal without going through other levels?
If it's egregious, potentially. That is very rare, but it may occasionally happen. And that's going to be hugely situational. Okay. All right. This area here, the classroom. Do you guys have any questions out here? Any clarification? Well, beautiful then. Well, then that does it for me. Thank you guys so much for attending. I appreciate you coming through. If you'd be so good as to complete your evaluations, then I appreciate it. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for coming.